Delhi girl kiss Miss India titles. All the three girls from Delhi.
Perhaps the most obvious fact about human existence is that human beings spend a large portion of each day speaking, listening, reading, and writing. The human ability to communicate seems to be one of the important factors which sets it apart from other animals.
Speech communication forms an important component of the total human communication system. It is a human process through which people make sense out of the world and share this sense with other people. Speech communication helps us to organize experience while sharing perceptions about the environment. It is also through the language that the meanings are shared. Thus, speech communication forms the very foundation of all human relationships.
Effective communication is not simply the ability to engage in a conversation or to charm an audience from behind a lectern. It requires a high level of awareness as well as the ability to analyze, speak, and listen. There are three qualities of an effective communication. Effective communication is understood. Effective communication achieves the intended effects. Effective communication is ethical. There are three principles of speech communication. Speech communication is never static. It is an ongoing process.
Speech communication is irreversible. The human mind works like a tape recorder that cannot be shut off. Its tapes, once made, cannot be erased. If new information is to be stored, then new tapes have to be made. Likewise, speech communication is irrepeatable. Its events, once they have taken place, cannot be repeated in the same manner. The communicators and the context are never static. They are always changing.
Every speech communication has both a content aspect and a relationship aspect. Content aspect is the verbal message. The relationship aspect provides non-verbal information about the way the content aspect should be received. The relationship aspect is thus meta-communication, that is, communication about communication. Often, non-verbal behavior provides meta-communication about verbal messages.
The ability to communicate effectively depends directly upon the ability to meta-communicate appropriately. Context, clothing, voice, energy level, eye contact, body position, and movement. These are just some of the factors that influence the way messages are understood.
The relationship aspect of communication is particularly complicated. Age, sex, ethnic or cultural differences and all other factors influence the dialogue. The 7 basic elements of communication are a source, a message, a channel, a receiver, noise, feedback, and context. Communication involves information. The point at which information originates is the source. Roughly speaking, a source may be a beautiful sunset, a garden, or anything that serves as a stimulus to human senses. A source is a human being who encodes a message. Encoding is the process through which messages are cast into a system of signals. Messages are the products of encoding. Within the context of speech communication, a message is defined as any signal or stimulus to which a receiver assigns meaning. Words, gestures, behaviors, clothing, tone of voice, all are messages where they are interpreted by the receiver of communication. A channel is a pathway through which message signals pass between a source and a receiver. Senses serve as communication channel for face-to-face communication. Sight, sound, touch, and even taste and smell act as pathways for messages. Telephone lines and radio waves are examples of channels that are used for long-distance communication. The receiver is any individual or group towards whom communications are intentionally or unintentionally directed. A receiver may be an audience for a public speech or a reader of a newspaper.
In human communication, the receiver is usually the person for whom the message is intended. In our case, you are the receiver. Encoding occurs at the source, whereas decoding of the message occurs at the level of the receiver. Decoding is an interpretive process of assigning meanings to words. Take for example, a person who is reading a magazine. The words in the magazine by themselves mean nothing. It is in the reader's mind that particular meanings are assigned to the words. Thus, what I am trying to say is that assigning meaning to words is something that occurs within the people and not within words themselves.
In communication theory, noise is anything that interferes with the clear reception of a message. Noise can be visual, oral, or internal. Effective communication is virtually impossible without feedback. Feedback is a receiver's response to a message that enables a sender to gauge whether he or she has been understood. Context is the entire communication environment. The same behavior may be interpreted very differently as the context or environment changes. The context may be cultural and physical or both. Different cultures have different norms for communicative behavior. Physical context is another important variable. Some environments are conducive to conversation while others are not.
Remember that none of these components is completely isolated from the others. These components can be identified in all communication systems. As such, they form the foundation of understanding human relationships. The important thing to remember is that communication is never static. In fact, it is a flowing interrelationship of simultaneously occurring variables.